Hello geometry students, welcome to the next video. I'm still wearing the same clothes because I'm still in my classroom making videos. So today we're going to talk about part 2 of 9.4 where we're going to learn about another special right triangle. And today's special right triangle is the 30, 60, 90 triangle. So follow along in your notes and let's get started. Our theorem says that in a 30, 60, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is always going to be twice as long as the shortest leg, and the longer leg, I like to call it the middle side, but it's the longer leg, is going to be multiplied the square root of 3 times whatever the shortest side is. So here's what we have in this picture. We have our short side. Remember, your short side is always across from your longest angle. So this short side is across from that 30-degree angle. Then we have what I like to call the middle side. It's your other leg, and it's going to be across from the middle angle, which is the 60-degree angle. So if I know the short side, I get to multiply that number times the square root of 3, and that gets me to the middle side. But if I know the short side, I can also get to my hypotenuse, which we know is the longest side of that right triangle, simply by doubling it. So I'm going to take that short side, multiply it by 2, and that's going to get me to the hypotenuse. So the key to this problem, as we see it right now, is if you know that short side, you can get to the middle by multiplying by the square root of 3, and you can get to the longest simply by doubling it, multiplying by 2. So it says when going from a short side to a long side, what operation did we just talk about doing? We talked about multiplying. So we're going to either multiply by the square root of 3, or we're going to multiply by 2. What we haven't talked about yet in this video is what happens if they give us a long side and we need to go back to the short side. Well, we did that with the 45, 45, 90 triangle. If you remember, we divided. Same thing is going to happen with this one. If you're going from long to short, you're going to divide. So just remember, if you're going to go from short to long, we're going to multiply. If we're going to go from long to short, we're going to change that operation to division. So let's try it out. This first example says find the value of x and y. Leave your answer in radical form. So in the picture, I have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And what I know that I have is I have the short side right here. I know it's the short side because it's across from the 30-degree angle. So in this picture, I know that x, I'm calling that my middle side. And I know that it's the middle side because it's across from the 60-degree angle. And that means that y is going to be the long side because it's across from the 90-degree angle. And hopefully that makes sense because we've talked about that sort of thing when we dealt with triangles a couple chapters ago. So we said to get from the shorter leg to the bigger leg, otherwise known as the short side to the middle side, we're going to take our short side and we're going to multiply it by the square root of 3, and that's going to give us that middle side. Also going back to the short side, we get to take the short side, multiply it by 2, and that is going to give us the long side. So right away, just from knowing the short leg, we can get to the other leg and we can get to the hypotenuse. All right, let's take a look at example 2. Example 2 is a little bit different. According to our picture, the short side is x. It's across from the 30-degree angle. The middle side is 7. It's across from the 60-degree angle. And the long side is y. It's across from the 90-degree angle. Well, we really haven't learned anything about a relationship between the middle side and the long side. So right now we can't do that. But we did learn that to get from short to middle, you multiply by the square root of 3. But this time we don't have the short, we have the middle. We're going backwards. So we're going to take that 7 and we're going to divide by the square root of 3. We're dividing because we're going from a longer side to a shorter side. Now this runs us into that problem we saw yesterday with the 45, 45, 90 triangle, and that is I can't have a radical in the bottom of my fraction. So we're going to multiply numerator and denominator by the square root of 3. Whatever I do to one, I have to do to the other. And the reason we're doing that is because now in the denominator, we have a pair. So we get to take out a 3, and in the numerator, we're going to have 7 onto the square root of 3. And then I kind of look at the 7 in the numerator and the 3 in the denominator and ask myself, can I reduce? Which I can't. And so my final answer for x is that value right there, 7 on the square root of 3 divided by 3. So there's my short leg. Now I need to go from short to long. So what did we just learn today? We learned that to go from short to long, we're going to take the short side and we're going to double it, which just means we're going to multiply by 2. Now if you want, you can stick a 1 as your denominator for the 2. And remember with fractions, you want to multiply straight across. So numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. Well, if I go across and I multiply, these two numbers are both on the outside of a radical, so I can multiply those together. That's going to give me 14 on the square root of 3. In the denominator, 1 times 3 is 3. And then I'll look at my numbers that are outside of the radical, and I find that I cannot reduce them. And so that's it. That's going to be my answer for the hypotenuse of that triangle. So maybe not the prettiest answer, but mathematically certainly is correct. All right, example number 3. We have the short side as x. It's across from the 30-degree angle. We have the middle side as 22. It's across from the 60-degree angle. And we have the long side as y. It's across from the 90-degree angle. So basically the same idea as what we did in the last problem. We're going to take our middle side and we're going to divide by the square root of 3 to get to the short side. Again, we can't have that radical. So we're going to rationalize the denominator. So I'm multiplying both the numerator and the denominator by the square root of 3, which means 3 is coming out in the denominator, and 22 on the square root of 3 is the numerator. Those numbers right there do not reduce, and so that is my answer for the short side. Now I need to go from the short side to the long side. Remember, that just means we're going to double it. So we're going to take that short side, and we're going to double it, so I'm going to multiply by 2. Same thing as multiplying by 2 over 1. And I'm going to end up with 44 on the square root of 3 over 3. Again, those numbers don't reduce. There's nothing I can do there any farther. And so that is my hypotenuse and the value of y. All right, so next example. Similar idea. Here we have the short side. We have the middle side. And we have the long side. So we're kind of seeing the same type of problem here. I've got the middle side, and to get to the short side, I'm going to divide by the square root of 3. And here's what I noticed right away. I have a square root of 3 in both the top and the bottom of my fraction, and guess what gets to happen? They're going to cancel each other out, and that's going to leave us with 15, and that's my short side. So those canceled each other out. I didn't need to rationalize the denominator because I had the same factor in both the top and bottom, and that divides and turns into a 1. So it's gone. Now I get to take my short side, double it to get 30, and that's going to be the answer for our hypotenuse. So it's really nice if you can get rid of those radicals. Makes the process a little bit easier. All right, so example number 5, a little bit different. So y represents the short side. It's across from the 30-degree angle. X is our middle side. It's across from the 60-degree angle. And this time 78, that's our long side because it's across from the 90-degree angle. So again, we don't have a relationship between the long side and the middle side, but we do have a relationship between the long side and the short side. If I knew the short side, I could double it to get the long side. But we're going to go backwards because we know the long side, and instead of multiplying by 2, we're going to divide by 2. So 78 divided by 2 is 39. That's going to be our short side, which is y. Then we want to take our short side, and to get from short to middle, we're going to multiply by the square root of 3, and there's nothing else to do for that particular problem. So if you're going from long to short, you just want to divide by 2. All right, so at this point, I would encourage you, pause the video, try the next 6 problems, and then pick back up and let's see how you're doing. So pause. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with those problems. So number 1 says find the value of x. So in this particular picture, x represents the long side, and the piece of information that we have been given is the short side of a 30, 60, 90. How do I go from short to long? I double it. I multiply by 2, and our answer is going to be letter D. All right, number 2, find the value of y. Y in this particular picture is the middle side, and the information that we have been given is about the short side. So, how do I go from short to middle? I'm going to multiply by the square root of 3. So I'm going to get letter C, 25 times the square root of 3 for my answer for number 2. All right, number 3, what's the value of x? All right, well in this picture, x is the long side because it's the hypotenuse. And the piece of information that we have been given is about the middle. Well, remember that there's no relationship between these two. So what we have to do is first go from middle to short, and then take our answer for short and use it to find the long. So we're going to take the middle side, we're going to divide it by the square root of 3 because we're going from middle to short. Square root of 3 is going to cancel out. That means our short side is 21. How do we get from short to long? We double it. So 21 times 2 is going to give us an answer of A, which is 42. All right, number 4, find the value of y. This represents the middle side. The information that they gave us is about the long side. Again, there's no relationship between those two. So in order for me to solve this problem, I first need to get the short side, and then I can take my short side and work my way over to the middle side. Well, if I have 22 for the long side, I'm going to divide that by 2. That's going to give me 11. That tells me that's what the short side is. And to go from short to middle, we're just going to multiply by the square root of 3. So we're going to end up with letter B, 11 times the square root of 3. All right, number 5 says the hypotenuse of a 30, 60, 90 triangle should just be triangle, not multiple triangles. Measures 16. What's the measure of the shortest side? Well, hypotenuse, remember, is the long side, and they're asking us for the shortest side. So remember, how do we get from long to short? We divide by 2. So 16 divided by 2 is going to give us letter D for this last one. Not last one more. Here's the last one. It says the measure of an altitude of an equilateral triangle is 4 on the square root of 3. Let's talk about a couple of things. Equilateral triangle. Equilateral means all sides are equal. So all of these sides are equal. We learned back in chapter 4 that if it's equilateral, it's automatically equiangular too. So that means that all the angle measures are 60 degrees. When we got into chapter 5, we talked about altitudes. We said that an altitude starts at a vertex, goes over to the other side, and when it hits it, it creates a right angle. And in an equilateral triangle, specifically, an altitude is going to bisect that angle right there. So that 60 degrees has been chopped up into 2 30-degree angles. So what we have is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And it says that the altitude, and let me see how I can write this, right here is 4 on the square root of 3. Now that 4 on the square root of 3 is directly across from the 60-degree angle. So what that tells me is that we have the middle side. How do we go from middle to short? Do you remember? To go from middle to short, we're going to take that 4 on the square root of 3, and we're going to divide by the square root of 3. Those square roots of 3's are going to cancel out, and we're going to be left with 4. And that represents the short side of the 30, 60, 90 triangle. That means that it's going to be across from the 30-degree angle. So let's go to our picture and put that there. Here's my 30-degree angle. So right across from it, from here to here, is 4. But guess what? It's the same thing over here with this 30, 60, 90 triangle. Across from that 30-degree angle is also 4, which means that entire side, you might have guessed it, is a total of 8. So here's what the question is asking us. It says find the perimeter of the triangle. Well, remember, if it's equilateral, that means all of the sides are the same. So 8 and 8 and 8 are going to give us a perimeter of 24. Okay, so you have a worksheet that goes along with this lesson. Again, email questions, although I'd really like it if you would go to the website and post them in the blog. That's going to be probably better for me. And then let me know how you're doing, and I will see you in another video, hopefully in some different clothes next time, although go Georgia.